begin, ni hao. I do not speak any Chinese. I'm very sorry about this. That's probably as far as I go. But today I'd like to give you a glimpse into the world in which I work and I live through the eyes of three specialists that are going to come to speak to you today about their specific projects within the Asia region. Before that, I wanted to make sure that you're on the same page as I am and we are as to why we're talking about smart city in the context of makers. So I work for a foundation called Fab City Foundation, and our work is about understanding how we can go from Pito to Dito. So Pito, product in, trashed out, is something that we kind of live in right now. We're quite aware of this, this urban paradigm, which is cities metabolize waste, things go in, products go in, and trash comes out. Our idea of how our urban paradigm could work is more this, Dito, data in, data out. So this is basically moving information along communication lines and fabricating and producing locally. So where do the makers come into this? You may recognize this map, some of you may know what a Fab Lab is. So a Fab Lab is basically a small digital fabrication laboratory that has the same capacity to make things in every single location in which it pops up. And this is an outreach program of MIT Centre for Bits and Atoms and is currently run by the Fab Foundation. And there are actually around 2,700 of these labs creating an infrastructure across the world on every single continent. So what this means is that, as the name suggests, Centre for Bits and Atoms, you can move bits, information, across lines, across borders, and then turn that into atoms locally through fabrication technology, through the hands of makers. So at Fab City Foundation, we build upon this and we take this idea and this logic and we place it, or we look at it at the city scale. We currently have 52 cities involved, and actually, yes, Shenzhen is one of those cities. And we actually work with these cities to understand how we can put makers at the heart of a digital transition that is not only about smart cities, but also about smart citizens. We do this with this model. This is our framework that we use, which is called the Fab City Full Stack. So we use digital infrastructure at the base, skills and learning, incubation projects. So we heard about the projects in Namtao. This is an incubation project that could be very relevant at this layer. Orchestration with local communities and organizations. Again, in Namtao, you had this example, we had a question about this, working with communities and citizens to implement these technologies coming from the Fab Labs and makerspaces. Territorial implementation strategies, bioregional principles, so not just the city as a standalone organism, but how it connects to the natural world around it. And then global networks, so much like the Fab Lab network or the Maker Faire network, right? So we have this multi-layer approach, top-down, bottom-up. So this gives you some kind of example or some kind of context in which I'm going to be talking today. We're not just talking about the smart city that will create IoT and CCTV networks across all the layers of the infrastructure, but also a cultural movement, a way of working and doing. And that's what we look at the Fab City Foundation. And that's what I hope you get through the case studies that I'm going to introduce today. So let's introduce our speakers. So, first of all, we have livelihoods, who is actually also a local. Wonderful, welcome, thank you. And he's the Curriculum Director of People Innovation Edu Centre SIFC. Would you like to take a seat? You can take a seat. Our second speaker is Chirag. So Chirag Sharma is from Bhutan, has already spoken today. Senior Analyst at Culture and Investments. And third and final speaker, Ginger, Contest Manager at Hackster.io and AVNet Community. So, I will also preface this section by saying, we've all just had lunch. We're a little bit tired. You know, the energy in the room is high, but this is going to be a relaxed and enjoyable session, panel session. okay? So nothing too serious here. I don't take myself very seriously at all. So first of all, we have Lit, who's going to present her talk. Go ahead. So each of our panelists will discuss their projects quickly, and then we'll have a quick discussion, and you're all welcome to join.
Okay, so thank you for your time today, and I'm going to talk about PBL, if you have heard about the term before. And so my work, if you pay attention to the full stack model, then my work actually is at the second level, like create new forms of learning. And today I bring over 3 examples, 3 ongoing projects that my studio is working with school now. But a little bit about the background. So is there any difference between a factory and a school? So from my point of view, I don't think they are different. So a factory maybe produce products, but a school produce people, produce working force, right? And then when we spend a lot of time and talking about manufacturing 4.0, so what's the corresponding 4.0 for educational system? So my answer to that is PBL. So to the right actually are 2 cycles that I usually use to start my professional training in schools or my teacher. The 2 cycles for PBL. I'm not going to walk through one by one today, but I'm going to highlight some elements in it. For example, here, actually, when we talk about PBL, it's very important that your students feel they are learning something for real. We call that authenticity. So how can a teacher make students to feel they are learning something for real? Because that needs meanings. You need to create meanings for your students. If not, they all know, or in your experience as students, they all know we are learning something fake, at least for now, or for text. You can toss away after the standardized text. And my first example, actually, I work with the Nantou School. It's the only school in the Nantou Asian city, the only one. And I grew up in this village, so I kind of have over 13 years experience with this area. And the purpose why we are doing that, the goal of the school is deepen students' understanding of their home. Because they live there, they go to school, they play there, but they don't understand the history and why all these renewals happen. So this is the first purpose. And the second one is how to make them feel or cultivate a sense of ownership. That as students, as primary students, just a few years old, can I make a little bit of change in this community? That's the second purpose. And the third one is, can they really do something in the community? So as a teacher, I always believe that everyone has the power to make a little bit of change. No matter you're a primary school student or you're a specialist, you don't need to wait for others to tell you what to do, but you can make the decision to make some change by yourself. And what we've done in this project, so we use a lot of museums, resources in the community, and bring students out of their classroom to understand the history, the change of the Nantou Asian city. And then finally, they design some product, they design something. For example, they understand the Silk Road and they come up with some idea, how can I transform that piece of history into a desktop game, or some other thing, like design a stand for the stores in the Nantou Asian city so that they can add a little bit of fun to visitors. And the second project is a middle school project. It's the Yucai No. 2 middle school, Yucai 2中, if you have heard about that. So Yucai number 2 middle school is located in Shekou, actually the specific original point of the old reform of Shenzhen, right? And time is money, efficiency is life. That's the slogan of the whole movement. But after several decades of development, Shekou became an area full of a lot of discarded factories, and they are experiencing a painful upgrade in their industry. So how can we make that happen, and how can we involve students into it? So we send students out to understand like the vegetarian and understand the power system, the water system, understand those systems. And then they come back to the classroom and we discuss how can we design a new Shekou if some unexpected change, unexpected situation happen. For example, like typhoon or the rise of the ocean level, those problems, how can we design a more resilient Shekou? And the last one and most recent one is a high school project. So in this project, actually we are designing a 4 years curriculum, integrate a lot of different subjects together, including science, social science, art and design, computer science, and English arts. So we lead our students to think about the problems in their real life. For example, like should we preserve like Cantonese or not, those dialogues or not? How can you use your social science knowledge to know more about that, and how can you change people's attitudes towards that? Or we talk about how can we create new forms of textures, new forms of fabric with bio, and create new product, more sustainable product. Or religions, actually, this is another desktop game, and talking about Buddhism. How can we communicate the ideas and concepts in Buddhism to other people? So those are some examples of projects. So if you are interested in creating such change in your community, please say something, or we can talk later. Yeah. So should we give this?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Lee. This is an amazing example of how we see digital fabrication being really embedded into the fabric of society at multiple different levels. So this is a really great example. Our next speaker is coming to us from Bhutan, Sharad.
Hello, can you hear me? So continuing with whatever I've spoken 2 hours ago, this is Bhutan, right? Some of the images that you see, what we are is usually so it's very culture driven. In 1616, a Tibetan monk came into Bhutan. His name is Jabru Namgyal, and that's when Buddhism was born in Bhutan. Till then, all of Bhutanese, we were barbarians, and when we say barbarians here, we could have been candles for no one knows. So with that, religion came into effect, and it's very deeply rooted to Tibetan Buddhism that way. And that's how, if you see some of the march dances, these are taken directly from Tibetan lineage. And talking about 1660, if you go to the United Kingdom, they had William Shakespeare who was writing books and plays during that time, so you can see how much of a divide there was in terms of development. And you can see stupas, monasteries. So all of our citizens are very deeply rooted with religion, culture, history, and our games, of course. But then, if you look at the monks, it's not just about monks in Bhutan. We have to think about our women, our society, our farmers. You see everything, the agricultural lands that are there. So, like I mentioned before, Bhutan is the only carbon negative country in the world. So, what that means is we absorb more carbon than we emit. So, all of the pollution that's being polluted by India, China. We're like the lungs to India and China. For example, we're like the Amazon forest to not to North America and South America. Right? But with this, it's always hard for us to develop. I mean, if we just keep our forest pristine and virgin, then how do we develop? That's a very big question for us. So our constitution demands that we keep 60% of our country as forest cover for all times to come, and we're 72% forest cover until this day. And even if we cut down trees, what happens is a community is given forest. They can only cut down from that forest, and they need to replant. And government provides them with subsidy to do that. So that happens, and that's why our forest reserve is increasing on a daily basis. But then if you look at agriculture, then water is a major issue in the country. Of course, we have a lot of water, but there's not good access to water. So there's a difference between water reserve and access to water. Why? Because we don't farm sustainably. We can only farm during summer, and most of it is paddy, rice plantations, so it takes up a lot of water. So these are some of the challenges that we face. Of course, there's also the economy, because Bhutan's USD reserve is very less. So that's why we're also facing rain drains. So what rain drains or exodus is so you see all these farms, their families, there are only old people who are living in this. There are no young people. Why? Because they're migrating outside their country. Because of better economic opportunity, because of better exposure, I guess, and maybe just explore globally or internationally. So these are some of the issues that we're facing. But then COVID happened, like I mentioned previously, and then it was an eye-opener for Bhutan because we had nobody who could help us. We were alone. That's why innovation ecosystem came as a kickstart for Bhutan, and that's how the makerspace and then the Fab Labs and then how a network of Fab Labs became our Fab Nation. So just as Pete mentioned, we're not just a Fab Nation. Why? Because we have around 5 cities that are connected with the Fab Lab network, and we try building onto that into a Fab Nation. We have a lot of exchange, knowledge exchange, export, sharing of ideas, sharing of skills, resources. So that's why we are a Fab Nation. And when we presented the 7 stacks initially, I think we fulfilled almost the 6th stack. Now we just need to share it with the global community, which we're doing now. So hopefully we got it into the 8th stack. So yeah, if you look at some of these, all of those paddy fields, everything is connected. But the problem there is we have wild boars, bears who come in and eat all of the farmers' land. I mean, is it wildlife's fault? No, right? I mean, it's their forest. We humans have just intruded into their ecosystem. But then, for us, how do we live harmonically with wildlife? How do we ensure that there's no human-wildlife conflict? That's why, if you look at Bhutan, the whole country is ecologically and biologically connected, meaning the wildlife or wild animals can move around the whole of the country without affecting the people. But of course, like I was mentioning the story, one of the farmers had brewed 2 tons of rice wine, and a bear came and drank that rice wine, and he was drunk for 3 days. Of course, he didn't do anything as such, but I mean, it's the fault on our side because we didn't ensure that the bear could freely roam in a suitable manner. But then, we also have small monks who don't know what sustainability, accountability is. That's why we're also trying to use our digital fabrication space to ensure that each and every one of us are mutually connected, and there's a lot of sharing of knowledge and resources. So these are the things we're doing through the lab. Number one is we built a water management system. So what it can do is it can track water from your glacial level to your outflow level. And we can actually determine the losses that's in the system. Why the losses? With the losses, we can see how much water we could have saved, and with that water, what could have been done. Because Bhutan, majority of the electricity used to be exported to India, and that also gives us the most revenue. But then during COVID, things didn't work out. So we set up a Bitcoin mining plant. And Bhutan is the only country that mines Bitcoin using clean renewable energy. So that's an interesting part. And we don't usually mining cryptocurrency requires a lot of cooling, but then because of the favorable weather conditions in the country, it's possible. So we don't need any ACs or coolers to run this mine. And along with this, with the water management system, we also work a lot on agriculture, whereby we try determining the health of the crops and then recommending crops for farmers in the system. So the farmers can directly log into the system and give the parameters of the soil. And then once they've done that, we actually recommend them, say, oh, you can plant cabbage, you can plant maize, looking at the condition of your soil. And with whatever project that we do, we ensure that we train the community. Because we really gone, you never know, but the community will always remain there. So one of my suggestions to all of you makers is once you do something, it's always nice to hand over whatever you've learned technically and professionally. So even if we install a small system with electronic circuit, we ensure that we train them on how to use, handle, and make sense of the system, because ultimately you're building the system for them and not for you. This is the agriculture crop recommendation system that we use. So we use some of the sensors that, of course, were procured from China again, and then we try determining some of the parameters, and then we recommend that, for example, this soil was favorable to grow maize and beans. Maize because it fixes the nitrogen in the soil, and then maize because it's a stable type in the eastern part of Bhutan. So these are some of the things that we do using the super paddler. And interestingly, we also had the Fab Bhutan 23, where Fab City Foundation and Fab Foundation and so forth, Bits and Atoms were hugely involved. I mean, they were the main organizers of this event. And here we came up with 5 problems, right? Number 1 is human-wildlife conflict that I mentioned earlier. Number 2 is, so during a weaving process, usually in Bhutan, a lot of weavers sprain their back because it's very conventional weaving form. So that way we have come up with the solution. Number 3 was cultivation of rice during summer. Number 4 was building assistive tech device for different abled people. So yeah, these were some of the challenges, and we had the whole global makers and innovators coming to Bhutan and then solve that problem. And I'm happy to inform everyone that we're still working on this, and from now we're working from prototyping to making the minimum viable product, or MVP, next. And of course, there's a commercial sense to the product that will definitely go commercial, but it's for the community and we don't generate any revenue, or it doesn't bring any financial impact to us. It's just for the community. So, I think it's your slide. So going back to this and to Fab City Foundation, the conversation we had. So you need to look, as makers, I think you need to directly involve yourself in the community on trying to see where you're trying to solve a problem, how you're trying to solve a problem. It should be an iterative approach whereby you always talk to the stakeholders or your community in developing the system. That will always help your system to be better, rather than just building something and then giving it to the community. So there has to be a multiple feedback process, onboarding process, a workflow, then your product will always be better. With that, I hand it over to Singer. Oh,
no, that's perfect, Sharon. Thank you very much. So this is a perspective coming from the national level, from a perspective of the government. And now this makes a lot of sense, because Ginger was actually in Bhutan and actually took part in developing some of the challenges or the solutions to the challenges that Sharon was talking about. So this is a perfect segue. Please welcome Ginger.
Yeah, this is totally a perfect segue, because I think every time when I hear things about Bhutan, I'm still just so, I want to go back to, the days when we had the conference. It's definitely one of very life-changing event, for me as well. And I actually want to, I wear this purse, on stage. This is on purpose, because this is actually a piece of fabric from Bhutan that's made by a traditional weaver. So for those of you who are not super familiar with this kind of like artisan. This is actually from a Bhutanese. In Bhutan, this type of like fabric is actually called kishitara. And the piece of like this is actually the piece is about about that big. So I can only afford the one that it gets to make into a purse. But a normal actually is in the highest kind of like the desire of a Bhutanese woman. Like we'll have like this one piece, that's just, it's a piece of art that they get to wear either to their wedding, only in special traditions. And to even make a piece like that, it will take the traditional artist about sometimes like a year to make that. And it's a highly regarded art, like artisan. It might look, like not so much if you're like not careful of it. But once you're actually in Bhutan and look at the loom machine and look at how people have been making, for hundreds of years, and turn it into an art, and it's specific by village, it's specific by family, and it's a heritage, it's a whole cultural heritage. It's just totally like changed like my worldview a little bit. So not a little bit, a bit. So yeah, like if you definitely, if you ever have the chance, to travel, for Bhutan, I actually didn't even know where Bhutan was, about from like a year ago, and then that kind of and it totally changed my worldview this year, when I was in Bhutan. So in contrary to this piece I'm wearing, that's purse. This thing on my I'm wearing now as a dress. It's another maker project, actually from my very dear friend. Her name is Yang. She's a fashion designer, also Chinese descent. But this is kind of special, because it might be a little bit cute, right? This is like super tradition, and this one there's actually a crowdsourced amount of hats from our friends that she just crowdsourced and then printed on this fabric. Again, it might not seem, it might be like just like a regular dress, like with hat, but she used like all sorts of like digital tools to actually make this fabric happen. And what she as a maker actually really strives for, and this ties a little bit actually back to Bhutan, is we right now live in a society that's just so overly produced in terms of things. That she wanted to go back to a kind of like in the old days, like made to order, more sustainable practice around making clothes. So when we talk about make, right? In the maker, a lot of people think about robots, electronics, sensors. These are things what people think makers are. But what I really want to bring back to some of like the context is that makers are everywhere, like people who are doing traditional crafts, people who are fashion designers, those are all makers. So yeah, just those are my project. So I work for a company called Hackster.io. How many of you have heard of Hackster? Any? Okay, so some of you have, some of you haven't. The kind of in compared to the Bhutan and this project, that's more like a city scale. Hackster is an online community of makers. It's an online community of developers, makers from all around the world. So part of like what I do, I kind of travel around the world as a digital nomad, and then our whole team is distributed. So I kind of have this privilege of just seeing innovations, and especially around smart city from all over the world. Because I'm the contest manager on Hackster, what we do is we kind of like bridge between the big companies, that produce, let's say electronics and stuff, and bridge them with the global developer community. So now let's say you are an innovator from China, you are a maker from China, you can participate in this kind of online forum and to still be able to distribute your idea like globally. So very important that I think that's a resource that a lot of people kind of like undermine. They always think a little bit more like in the local context. But I do want to say that right now there's so many, and Hackster's just one of them. So many of these global knowledge that can be exchanged between global and local, and communities like this is definitely one way for that kind of knowledge exchange. So for those of you who are interested, I'm hosting a contest that's coming up called the Future of Resilience contest. The contest is actually backed by microchip. So how the Hackster contest always runs is that we actually give out the hardware to all over the world. You can apply to participate in the contest, and if you submit a good idea, we'll ship you the hardware. And a lot of time for people that's in, let's say, Africa or like Indonesia, places that they don't have the normal electronics distribution, they also have the chance to get the hardware and build something locally. Next week, what's happening is actually a free global virtual event that's called Impact Summit. So if you're interested in just get free training opportunities, please go to Hackster Island and sign up for the Impact Summit. I want to highlight this because this is one of my favorite users on Hackster. She's again, one of like my favorite little maker, and this is actually a smart city project. She does this with her dad. She's 7th grade. She's in 7th grade. So she built like a whole IoT project all the way actually even incorporated ML AI learning for a smart lake in detecting algae in her own area, like in her neighborhood. So 7th grader, and we actually have many of those, many of these young makers all over the world. And we as Hackster and as a community, we really much celebrate this kind of like innovation all the way from bottom up. So the another one I want to bring up is Fab Lab Bali. Kate mentioned the whole Fab network that's throughout the world, and again, going to Bhutan. That's one of like the yearly events the Fab network organizes every year. Me personally, I'm helping to build Fab Lab Bali currently, and so for those of you who are here, like maybe first time, came to Chai Hall, or want to know what a makerspace or a Fab Lab can do. This is actually a journey of within 1 year where we're building the Fab Lab Bali, all the different stuff we do. We also do PBL project, and we can talk about later some of the challenges. We were actually in G20, and our team actually did the open citizen science kind of movement that can really shape like international type of strategy making. In general, from lab to field, we co-work with the community to co-create these kind of innovation with them. Earlier, somebody asked about we know how to make things, but we don't know how to find problems. We actually go out and to find problems and actually introduce technology into the real citizens. These are local fishermen, right? And then we come back to the lab to prototype. So this whole process is what enables smart citizen in our own context. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Gita. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to bring all of our panelists back onto stage. Now we can sit and look awkward in front of the screen. I think that's perfect. Please take a seat. And we're going to kick off a bit of a discussion now, because what we've heard today is 3 different perspectives that embody a similar idea. And in my perspective, it's a mix. It's a multi-scale mix in order to bring about a smart city through the lens of the citizen. So we need multiple scales of engagement. That is, we need government and we need regulatory investment in our solutions. We need people, we need communities, and we need education. Of course, we also need the IoT, we need the tools, and we need all these other aspects. But today we've heard three really different opinions and different perspectives on how three really important actors come to be a part of investing and developing smart cities. So my question to start this off is, from your perspective and in your projects, what is it that we can do as makers to engage further in this space of the smart city? What is it? Do we need more education? Do we need to talk to government? Do we need to create more communities? What is it in your perspective that we can do? Maybe let's start with.
Okay, so last year I joined the MDDI program, and one reason why I joined the MDDI program actually is to try to clarify the strategy, how to realize that future, the future all of us share, all of us have been painting. And I think the full stack model can explain a lot, and what I've been spending my time on is the second level, the education level, but actually I think more communication, collaboration between different levels can help a lot. So I really, I'm expecting more conversations with other levels. So what I can do is the education level, but I think collaborating with initiatives from other levels, together we can make some change.
Awesome. So it's not about the maker knowing how to do everything. It's also about the maker engaging with others and creating these networks and creating these kinds of synergies across different layers and different stakeholders.
Exactly, and because I've been training a lot of teachers, and also I feel teachers is another community, so another community who don't talk with other communities. So I've been spending time urging them to walk out also, to know, get more concepts about the whole picture also.
How about you, Ginger? What would you say? I mean, because also, just to contextualize this a little bit further, the MDDI is a master's program that the FABSI Foundation runs in collaboration with the Institute of Advanced Architecture of Catalonia. And Liv is an ex-student, alumni from our first year, and Ginger is a current student, and we have some other students in the house. So this is just to contextualize this. I think it's important that everybody understands what we're talking about. So Ginger, please, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so to picture, again, MDI is a wonderful program that really gives you a systematic, I think, approach, of how to analyze cities. And how to work with city. Because when we think about city or like kingdom, it's such a massive scale, it can be overwhelming. So I really love the program. It gives you actually tools, to help you condense all the different directions or different thoughts, around, like maybe that's in your brain and down to something that's actually actionable. So in terms of the, I think one thing during my experience is a lot of people, they don't have access to how to work on city, right? Unless you work for a city government, and some people think you have to be an elite, right? To work on city level strategy or things like that. Or, maybe you have to get an overseas degree, right? So I think a lot of time people don't realize that, or don't have the knowledge of where the access is in terms of how to work with city. And what I love about Hackster is that it kind of democratizes that. It democratizes that, it's online, anybody can participate, you become a Hackster user, and then, if you have a smart city idea, you could, use different Hackster toolings, or campaigns, to get yourself to realize that idea. So, for example, we have actually 30% of the Hackster community come from India, and a lot of the time, we don't see. We'll see kind of a range of different just like projects, like from around the world. I specifically remember last year we did a contest with a Nordic semiconductor. And the top winner was actually a project from Africa. And it's because they used that piece of hardware that so beautifully in a city it was actually to help just like a very rural community to conserve water or automatically control the water tapping. So let's say if that's in Shenzhen, it will be somebody that like a million maker could do as an intermediate project. But because of the resource he had over there, like in Africa, in the village, like you can literally see he hand soldered like each of like the parts of the electronics. So you have this really high-end Norwegian hardware combined with a bunch of like other DIY hand tool type of innovation, but that's a village transforming, impactful project that leverage technology. So I personally think, and then he put this whole documentation on Hackster and participated in the contest, and now other people know this kind of innovation exists in the world. So so I really think part of being smart citizen is that like it's ingrained in everyone, and everyone can be a maker. And there are tools exist in the world to showcase your own project, your idea. So don't feel powerless about city scale things and think you shouldn't be part of it.
Yeah, I think that idea of the city scale, this overwhelming scale that we are trying to create transformation on, is really relevant when you look at what you're doing in Bhutan, which is what you said. You're actually not even city scale; you're taking it to the national scale, kingdom. A fab kingdom is what you're creating. I wonder, can you give us some kind of idea about what is the individual's access or power within some of those smart initiatives that you have, like the Bitcoin mining, these kinds of things? What is it the individual can do? What agency do they have?
So, whatever project that Bhutan has been doing through the government or through the private sector, there's something known as the quadruple helix model, which was developed by Fraunhofer. So we follow that model, whereby when we say quadruple model, there are four entities that form the quadruple model. Number one is the government, of course. So you need to see what, for example, if you're a maker, then if you want to work with the government, you can see what your 5-year plan is, what the government's 5-year plan is, and then accordingly see if they have any problems that can be solved for you. Number two is the public sector. So if you can go into and talk with public entrepreneurs, public businesses, and see what their problems are. Number three is the community, of course. You can go talk to the farmers, the people that form a community. And number four is the academia. I think we forgot to mention that, all of us. So I think academia is one of the biggest asset that you can have, one of the biggest resource that you can have. Why? Because they are the ones who can take around, who can fail, who can learn a lot. So if you think of it that way, if you put all those four in a quadrant, then I think anyone can be a smart citizen, be it the government, be it the policymakers, be it the private sector, or the community. For example, in Bhutan, when we tried using drones to identify water level in the Himalayas, what happened is there was no such route to bring in 30 kgs of drone in the country. So we lobbied with the government, asking them, if we can have a sandbox policy regulatory framework, and that's crucial. So we need to constantly liaise with some of the stakeholders, and I think that's one of the most important parts. And one thing that most makers do wrong or do something different is that you first test the technology and then come up with the solution. For me personally, and I'm sure some of you might also feel that way, first you need to see what the problem is. Technology should only be a tool. That way you minimize, optimize on the use of technology so that people can understand your technology or your solution better. So one of the biggest mistakes that many of us make is we opt for the fanciest technology. For example, I use artificial intelligence, I use Internet of Things, but if there's no use of using them, I feel it's always better if we take the non-technological route as well.
Yeah, and I think, Gigi, you mentioned that with your bag, like what we're talking about there with the weaving in Bhutan is an actual fact of technology. And sometimes we forget this. Sometimes we forget that we actually have the technologies at our fingertips. And it's actually about saying, okay, is this a situation in which I need the best, Raspberry Pi or whatever it is, or is it something that I already have within me? Because technology can be such a vast space for us to tinker with, to play with, to experiment with, and to implement as individuals and also as communities. So I think that's really important. And the other thing you highlight there is that, when we talk about the full stack model, it's not just about top to bottom, bottom to top, but it's also horizontal. So it's also about collaboration across fields. And this is very important, something that Liv, you also mentioned, bringing different fields together and cross-pollinating them is something that, means that you're going to get the best from each industry and everybody is collaborating together in order to create the solution. Are there any questions from the audience? Anybody want to know more about any of these contexts that we have discussed?
Can I add a little bit?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So when Sharon just talked about the relationship between technology and the need, so I want to add something to this because I don't think there are two things that they grow by themselves and independently, but actually, while usually we think about we use technology to design something, to design solution, but actually we have the power to design our technologies also. So those tools can change so something like AI, they don't show down, or embedding circuits, they don't show down from nowhere. That's because someone made it, and then a bunch of engineers, they're thinking about how can we design such a technology. So let's put that in the picture also. So that's something I want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you walk around the Maker Fair, you will see people who have taken bits and pieces and created their own technologies. And I encourage you to ask them, why did you do this? What is the purpose of you developing this technology? Because that's what's really important, is putting that technology at the surface of needs of people around us, the world around us, and also, of course, to our cities to make them more resilient and, as we have been saying during this panel, more smart, let's say. Any questions from the audience? Otherwise, I have one last provocation for our speakers. Oh, yes?
Yeah, for me, it's first time heard about Fab City. I just want to generally understand more about how big is the organization, and you mentioned about Shenzhen is one of the cities actually under this program. So would you guys able to elaborate a little bit more about how you contribute to Citizenship?
Yeah, so Fab City is quite a small organization. We're actually based in the Estonia program, so I don't know if you're aware of this program. It's a program that allows you to be location independent. So you can run a foundation from Estonia, the Digital Estonia program. So we have 15 people in our team in, I think, every continent right now. We are very distributed. That also means that we're also very aware of different contexts around the world, which is quite wonderful for us to be so engaged across the globe. So we're coming up for our 10-year anniversary of the organisation, or of the movement, let's say. So we actually started Fab City by a complete accident. I'm going to tell you a full story right now. It was a mistake. We did not mean for this to happen. So we had the Fab event in Barcelona, and there was this big moment where Neil Gershenfeld from Centre of Bits and Atoms and the Mayor of Barcelona and some other people from IAC, from the Institute of Advanced Architecture of Catalonia, got on stage and said, right, I'm going to challenge all of the cities of the world to produce everything they consume. And they pressed a button. It starts a 40-year countdown. Let's do it. Let's make cities produce everything they consume. It was a big, moment, with photos, everyone's happy, clap, wonderful. And then time went on, and suddenly, cities started calling and saying, hey, can we be involved in this initiative? And, the organisers were like, oh, oops, we've created a monster. What have we done? So it kind of came out of this very organic flow of happen events. And that was 10 years ago. So we're now coming up to the 10-year anniversary of that happening. We now have 53 cities or 52 cities in the network, as I said. Not all the cities are active. Some of the cities are working on specific projects. Some of the cities are working on, for example, implementing NDVI program, implementing different projects, implementing some nationwide initiatives. But the foundation itself has been around for 5 years, which means that now we're really restructuring how we work with cities, what we're doing, and how cities actually contribute back to the network. So in Shenzhen, I don't know actually, and Violet's not here. It's the first time I've ever met Violet, and I need her. But anyway, she's not here, but she could tell you when they actually pledged and when they started. But the thing about Fab City is that it's a narrative for everybody to follow. So everything that's happening here in Nantao, everything that's happening here in the makerspaces is contributing to this vision. And what we are now looking to do as part of the network is to bring players together. So maybe it's Shiraz and maybe it's the makerspace locally to exchange, to cross-pollinate, to understand how they can support each other. So this is the position that we're at, and we're actually really excited to be back here because we really want to be able to kickstart this exchange with all of you in our network, sharing what is happening here locally with our local partners. So this is kind of a very quick, you can find me after, I can talk forever. Don't make me talk forever.
Just to add that, so every city has different needs, different requirements. That's why, I mean, I sound like I'm pitching for Fab City, but the way
It does not work.
but the way they've set up the Fab City stack is such a way that you can have your individual characteristics of the city and yet attain all the full layers. Because the problems for Bhutan with just having 700,000 people is totally different from the problems that Shenzhen faces, right? So that way, yeah, as we mentioned, can be organically connected with all the different layers and then share with different networks around the world.
I can fill in some information about Shenzhen. So actually, Shenzhen signed the Fab City the chapter back in 2016. So all 7 years from now on, yeah. And yeah, maybe some details progress. Violet can explain that because I use the Fab City model in my teaching also. So actually, from my point of view, I don't see many projects going on, but I deeply trust in the direction because the concept is about how to make a city more sustainable and make it able to support itself. So I think that is especially important in the last 3 years during lockdowns. Can we produce our food, or can we produce the power that we need? So that is a real problem in the last few years.
Yeah. I hope that helps. But yeah, come and find us after we can have a chat. Otherwise, we'll be talking forever. Any other questions from the house?
Thanks for the speakers, and I learned a lot about by your definition what a smart city is. And I think that when I heard the words about smart city, the first thing came to my mind is all about technologies, and you provide me the context, what would be the artifacts could be involved. But I think sometimes being smart to whom? Smart to whom, right? And the second word I'm thinking about, like, being smart sometimes make our decision more effective and make our life easier, but at the same time, there are price behind, right? So I was wondering from three of you, what would you think that you should be really careful and be really mindful when you are constructing a very smart city, say like the data privacy or all different kinds of stuff. And in different regions and different places could have different challenges, right? So I was wondering if there's any principles or framework of decision making actually you are applying while you are doing your projects. Thanks.
Yeah, I can go in first. For my country, we have some point that was termed by His Majesty the 14th, which is known as gross national happiness. What that means is you say that happiness is more important than gross development product GDP. So what we do is, so for example, there's a big project coming up in Bhutan. And what we usually do is we go for a round survey, asking the citizens whether you really want it. Would this make you happy? Would this make you mentally, emotionally, that project really up? And if that does, and if a lot of people say, oh, no, I don't think this project is going to make me happy, or isn't going to make me mentally, emotionally stable, then it goes to the government to say, the government will say, oh, then something's wrong. We might need to change our strategy, policy. So that way, I feel embedding GNH, cross-national happiness, into some of your policies, in some of your projects, would be an answer to your question. That's on Bhutan's perspective.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think it can be very personal to everyone. So I actually came from a how should I say that I now have this theory that in our current world we always looking for accelerator, right? If you're building a company, you have to join an accelerator, and also like if you work for corporate, then there's a lot of like performance index, and every month you have to show some kind of growth, right? These kind of things, that's just very ingrained in our modern society. So I very much love to build a decelerator, and try to actually one thing about focusing, right? And I think that's like if you're in the kind of like startup world, that's one concept people always strive for, but very little people actually can succeed is the focus and trim down the stuff that you don't need. But coming back to like kind of like smart city and everything, what makes Bali actually a little bit unique is that it's also very highly spiritual. There's a lot of culture in there, and in MDDI we learned something called ecological zoning. So there is actually, a system in terms of your ecological zoning and the social foundation. And there's a lot of intangible things that you cannot measure by amount of transaction of like business deals, right? These kind of things, but that's very intangible, in the fabric of your society. So learning those tools, in the Fab City stack, like it was probably like too fast for everybody to see what all of those stacks are. So to really analyze what that community's culture is, right? Let's say in Bali, people are huge on ceremonies, right? That's not something you probably see in Shenzhen or everywhere else. If you look at those like what people build for ceremonies, you will be like amazed. And over there, for the Balinese, the most important thing is actually their tooth-building ceremony. So when you come to age, and you actually your whole family comes together, you get put on bed, and then you shave off your teeth, right? To a lot of like, let's say Chinese or whoever else, then would be like, whoa, that is so strange, there's no technology or any of those kind of like contexts even around it, but it's actually so much in the social fabric and social foundation. I think when building a city level project, so technology becomes actually a very small part, and then you realize how to position technology. Another thing about technology that was very interesting came up during my recent MDDI study is that we were learning something called distributed leadership. It's distributed leadership, and we actually there are I think 8 or 10 of the students us together. We're all from around the world, somehow got together at the same time to do this class together, and we formed a circle. We formed a dream circle to dream up what we, let's say, want accomplish, like in our city implementation, our project implementation. And after that, the teacher said something that really struck me. He said, circle is one of the oldest form of technology. Nobody thinks that would be a technology, but it is something actually as a social technology that's developed hundreds of years ago for people to come to consensus, to come to a collective decision, instead of bottom down or like top down, decision making as a collective, and everybody feel included, everybody feel expressed, and everybody feel empowered. So yeah, like I think that's why to look into more of like the Fab City food stack and things, like we're living, especially here in Shenzhen, right? I have a very technology, like upfront in your face type of environment. But that's when I love to even step out more and say, where all these machines fit, if that's fit, and what is appropriate technology.
So I have this feeling that this is all very nice, was wonderful. It's very idealistic, you know, it has this great ring to it. Oh, we're going to save the world, we're going to use technology, this is wonderful. But in day to day, we have jobs, we have, you know, things to do, we have families to look after, we have, maybe we're going to school, we need to learn. How can we actually do this day to day in our lives? How can we actually break away from this kind of rat race that we have in our lives to appreciate and to start thinking outside the box and to start, you know, seeing ourselves not just as makers that kind of make technology, but also makers that can have an impact in the world? How do you do that? Do you have advice? Maybe Lit, you being in, you know, the education, you have some advice?
Yeah. I am still thinking about the last question. Sorry, I'm thinking about some terms that both of you brought up. So yes, I am going to share some examples in my daily teaching maybe. So for example, like why we need a smarter future, why we need a smarter city. So in my teaching, I introduce a lot of AI tools into the daily classroom. But sometimes I hate those tools and sometimes I love those tools. And for example, if my students use those AI tools to translate their English text into Chinese, to skip that part, I don't like it. And or use ChatGPT to give me a passage. I don't like it. But if some students who cannot draw actually use the AIGC tool to visually present to us their ideas, I love it. So do I have to answer why we need a smarter future? Actually, I don't. And there's some terms Ginger just mentioned, and I think those terms can answer Kate's question also. There are something like distributed leadership. So I think that's why we spend our time sitting here to have these conversations, because we need more opinions, right? We need more points of view to make decisions together as a whole, and also something like collective decision. Yeah, to make collective decision.
For me personally, and if you look at my nation's perspective, mindfulness is a key to making you more aware, questioning why you're doing it, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and where are you doing it. So keeping yourself connected with the real world, and of course it might sound like a cliche and because we're a Buddhist country, but for us, mindfulness is one of the key factors in making you more aware and making you a smart citizen as well.
My answer, I don't know if it can be applied to everyone, but for me personally, I start with my mother. If it's something that and she's not here, she's a character, but I just all of a sudden thought of her. But in terms of technology, because she is such on the verge of being, I want to say, 边缘化, like in Chinese means, kind of pushed out of the society, right? Because she moved to US, many years ago. So it's like now that bring her back to the digitized China. If this piece of technology she's even able to use, right? I run into those kind of very personal experience every day. So I try to actually use a lot of those very sharp feedback to my own design or my own practice in terms of it's like if it's something that it's going to change the world, it's whatever, change your whole city, and everyone becomes a smart citizen. But I also want it to be able to serve my own family, and I think that's something everybody can do, So it's like, okay, if this piece of whatever, whether it's tangible or intangible, test it on your own family. Try to explain it to your own family, and not for the kid, right? Because I think in China, everybody's like, okay, kids are smarter, like whatever. Like I actually say, kids are actually easy. Go to the old people. Try to explain this, or the reason why you're even doing that to your grandma, work with your like older uncle or aunt, and you'll have a blast in that conversation in terms of like your perspective of what you're doing. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that also resonates a lot with what we were saying before, and you mentioned it in your talk, and you also mentioned it, is actually starting in your own neighbourhood and in your own experience. So, we often look online and we get a lot of, information being into us, and we think like, yeah, I'm going to do that thing in LA. I'm going to be famous and I'm going to go here. This is also coming from the person who hasn't lived in her neighbourhood for 20 years, but that's okay. It's all about, for makers, it's all about actually not only using the technological resources, but also the social and cultural resources that you're privy to, that are around you. So I think, all of you represent different, let's say, different fields in which you've done that and you've exploited your own environments in order to make the most of your skills and how you work. Do you call yourselves makers, and how do you best use the environment around you as a resource for you? Maybe because you're from Dao and this is a nice local example. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, that's a very complicated story because I started my career as an engineer actually. So I have an engineer degree. I have a management degree and a designer degree, MBTI. So how would I describe myself or which term I would choose? Actually, it depends. It depends, like in front of what kind of people. Deep down in my heart, I definitely believe I'm a maker. Because I think maker. If you have heard about it, there's a very famous saying that we are all makers, and even if you are making biscuits. But for me, maker means you are determined to make a little bit of change. So I think change maker, the change is we just don't talk about it. But for me, that's the most important part. Yeah.
Chirag, are you a maker?
Also, it's multiple roles that I'm playing. Of course, I started as a maker, but then now I feel like I'm a bridge and builder for the makers. Why? Because I'm helping some of the makers talk to VCs, talk to investors, talk to potential clients. So that way, I also know the journey from a maker to a bridge to how you can go to the next level. So I guess, I'm here right now.
Okay, so I think I'm one of those that I always say I'm an artist want to be. So I think deep down in my soul I want to be an artist. But somehow growing up, especially in an Asian context, it's like we talk about smart citizens. I grew up in the social context where it's like, 如果你去读理工科的话，你以后一定会找到很好的工作。It's basic. Okay, so okay, so it's like if you study engineering, if you study STEM, right? You'll get a good job and you'll be stable and in like all these kind of contexts. So I did go to engineering school. I studied mechanical engineering. I won awards in like solar and renewable energy, all these kind of stuff. But in the end, I think because I always have that like artist heart thing. So that's how I kind of dropped into the maker world. Because all of a sudden it's like creativity, right? It's like funny stuff or things that doesn't even make sense. Sometimes that's in the maker community that just really touched upon me. So I stayed within the maker community for many years. Although my main work a lot of times is very serious. I do drones. I build like my own robotics company. All those kind of stuff. Talk to investors. But in the end, I think deep down, and this is what you actually see with a lot of people who retire from engineering, is they go into art. And all of a sudden, they have all the luxury, to do art, to do the stuff you want. And maybe that's what, I think, where I want to drive to. It's like following passion is hard, right? The things why parents tell us, oh, you have to do 理工科 and you're like, 当艺术家因为你没有办法赚钱. And it's because, there's the art side. But it is so important. I think in us, in terms of that creativity and just strive for creativity, it's in all of us. I think we're all born for it, and I think So I have never called myself a maker, but to me, maker is actually not so much like electronics engineer. I can program Arduino. It's more about unleash that creativity within you, and you have the power and you have the drive to learn different tools to make your imagination come true.
Okay, so now I'm going back to you, the audience. Who thinks of themselves as a maker? Hands up. Hands up proudly. Proud hands in the air. Okay. Okay. Oh, I have some. Sorry, Singapore crew. That's only half up. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay. Who thinks of themselves after hearing today's panel as a smart citizen?
We're all dumb citizens.
None of you are inspired to become a smart citizen. Yeah, all right. Yes, very good. We have one.
Here.
Yeah, two. Yes, Rosie. So I feel like one thing that we worry about a lot is how we actually identify in this context, right? So we hear from educators, we hear from experts coming from government, senior analysts, we hear from community managers inside some of the biggest digital platforms in the world, and we think, oh yeah, but what about little old me? Do I have a place in this future, and what is my place? So I think my encouragement for everybody today would be to really rethink what it is and how it is that you participate in your city. Because even though you don't put your hand up to say that you're a smart citizen, even being here today at the Maker Faire and seeing solutions that are outside of those solutions that you grew up with is positioning yourselves in a new context, which is one in which the smart city is built by the people who live in it. And that for me is very important, because cities are only a bunch of buildings if they're not filled with people. So it's the citizens themselves that create a city and make the city what it is. At Fab City, we really believe that, and we have the full stack in the background. I think you can see it. That really shows that even if we're talking about the very top layer, which is kind of where Hackster would sit, this digital infrastructure. It's not just digital infrastructures. That's just a boring bunch of, kind of connectors, semiconductors, all these kinds of bits and pieces moving information across the world. The internet is only the internet because of the people who are acting on it, right? And the people who are using it. So there's people involved in every single layer of this, and that is what is important here. And it's not just people who are technologists, it's not just makers, it's everybody. Ginger's mum is somewhere in these layers. My mum is somewhere in these layers. All of your mums is somewhere in these layers. The city is built by the people who live in it. So I don't know if we have any final questions or provocations from the audience. I mean, you're all smart citizens, so I feel like you should all be firing off, really crazy provocations. But maybe you can find us after. We're all going to be around, and we're all going to be enjoying the Maker Faire. So if you have any questions, or you want to get more involved, you want more information, you're more than welcome to come and talk to any of us. I say that on behalf of these three, but I know that they're wonderful open humans, so I'm very happy to talk to you all. And then if you want any more information about what we've talked about today or anything like that, you can always jump online, talk to the people at Maker Faire, or talk to us. So thank you very, very much for joining us, and I hope that you've learned a lot and you're going to go home smarter citizens.